Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, we had this guest in season 1, and I just wanted to bring her back and continue the conversation onwards. So my guest today is Arlene Pellicane, and she is, well, let's just say it, she's fantastic. And last time, which we'll link in the show notes so you can listen to it, we were talking about screen time and, digital technology for us, the adults, but let's simplify screen time with our kids. So Arlene's a speaker and she's an author of several books, including Parents Rising and 31 Days to a Happy Husband. She's also the co-author of Growing Up Social, which is raising relational kids in a screen-driven world, which she co-wrote with Dr. Gary Chapman. And so this is the book that we're going to focus on today. She's been featured as a guest on the Today Show, Fox and Friends, Focus on the Family, Family Life Today, and the 700 Club. She lives in San Diego with her husband, James, and their 3 kids, Ethan, Noel, and Lucy. I'd like to welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, Arlene Pellicane. Hello, Arlene.
Always great to be with you, Mary. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, so let's talk screen time, can
let's
we?
do it, right? No, I'm sorry. I'm getting something. I can't talk right now. Does this look like your children already?
Right. They do a lot of that, like, mom. No, eyes up here.
Eyes,
yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. So obviously, I've only been a parent for 10 years now. My kids are 8 and 10 at the time of this recording. And my kids have not known a life otherwise without screens. I mean, this has been with them since they were wee little. So how do we even begin? Where do we begin?
Yeah, I think it is very important for us as parents to realize that from birth to 10, like this window that we've had, right? My kids are 9, 12, and 14, that we are in the business of making a person. Mm-hmm. Like we've had this baby and now we're growing them up and they are becoming a human being. What kind of character will they have? What kind of self-control will they have? Are they going to be kind, empathetic? What kind of skills will they bring into the workplace? How easy will it be for them to read? Because that's key to school success. And then that success, of course, begets other success in life. Yeah. So all these things. And so this little jobby, it used to be that a family would have this huge TV and the mother and father would know exactly what was happening because they were right there with their kids. But with this, it's an individual amusement center for any age, and they can bring it wherever they want. And so parents need to realize that, wait a minute, I'm the parent. I can draw boundaries with this. And I hope today people will kind of be challenged to think, you know what, we need a screen-free mealtime. Or, you know what, I'm going to start collecting the phone at night. My child does not need a device, a tablet, iPad at night. You know what? I'm not going to have the iPad do the entertaining after dinner. We're going to read together as a family, so that there would be this decision to say, I'm going to switch this out so I can help make that person more emotionally ready for life, because we know that this is okay for, some amusement, but you can't do amusement and leisure. And now the average child, 8 to 18 is spending, 7 hours a day on a screen. Teenagers, of course, more like 10 hours a day. Yeah. And if a baby follows this general trajectory, by the time a baby is 7 years old, they spend a full year of 24-hour days looking at some kind of screen. And that is a terrible exchange, because as high def as this gets, nothing is more interesting than a full person, right? Talking and interacting. Because we think like, oh, we'll give our child this educational app, that'll really help them. But in fact, a real life person with all our pixels and all the things we can do, we are infinitely more capable of teaching our kids language and life skills than some kind of app.
Well, and, just to put a point in the map right there from what you said, because I think this is really worth talking about, is social media, first and foremost, has only been around for about 10 years, right? But when we were kids ourselves, this technology did not exist in our household. So we as parents, if you're listening to this and you're anywhere in the ages of, say, I don't know, the late 20s to late 40s, you weren't raised in a household where every single person in the household had some sort of electronic device. I mean, I was a kid of the late 70s and early 80s, and so, only the really special kids got a TV in their room, right?
Right.
But then that was like, oh, you really made it then, you know? So this is so new. This is a new territory for all of us, parents and for kids. And so I think there is a bit of just saying, right, this is a thing that has happened with technology. This is good. It's not, you know, screens are evil, but it's how do we manage this so that we can take back control of our lives, right?
And you have to be intentional as a parent. You can't just like, oh, we'll see. Let's see how it goes. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to be like, okay, this you can use at this time of day and for these reasons.
Yes.
And this is the social media you can have, and this is the one you can't. And you may use social media when you're 12 or whatever you decide.
Right.
You can't just think, oh, it'll work out, because it is designed by video game makers to addict your child as soon as possible, to make them think, oh, I need to get one more level, or I've got to get a gem, or I can't get off because my team player in China is going to be disappointed in me. Like, it's totally designed for chemically your child's brain to be like, okay, I'm done from school now. I'd like to play my video game. You know, oh, okay, I'm done with my chores. Where's my video game? Like, there's a reason why you are battling that. And there's a reason where your teenage girl keeps thinking like, oh, I have to see what's happening on Snapchat. You know, it's all designed to bring us back. And we have to realize that it's not just this nicey nice thing, but you see all these design ethicists talking about it out of Silicon Valley now, saying, you know what, we need to tell you that there are very, very big brains and big money behind keeping you on this thing as long as possible for your Netflix next program in your series to queue up immediately. So a child can't think like, oh, I've been sitting here for 3 hours.
Right.
I really should take a break, you know, and the parents thinking like, oh, it's so nice and quiet in the house. I'm getting so much done. Right. So it's we as parents that have to step in and say, okay, you've been on for a half an hour. So now, and your kid's not going to be like, well, aren't you being responsible? This is fabulous, Mom.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, they're going to scream and they're going to say, what? You know, what are you doing? This is crazy. No, I need to keep playing. You can't do that. And you as a parent need to have that resolve to say, wait a minute, my kid's going to grow up social, as in being able to be with people, talk to people, have skills, not just to be able to play a video game or take a really killer selfie.
So I'm curious then, what are the latest stats? What is the average amount of time a child spends in front of a screen per day?
Yes, it is that 7 hours a day in front of a screen. And I think that number will grow because so much of that time is also in school, and the schools are having screen time more and more as well. And, you know, and you think of that, that's the van ride in the car, that's the screen in the restaurant, that's the things at home. So that is a lot of screen time.
7 hours.
And the thing is, if a child, you know, plays video games, let's say 3 or 4 hours a day on average.
Yeah.
So maybe they really binge over the weekend and they do a little bit in the week. So, you know, obviously not every child is like this, but you could see how that's possible.
Right.
Then by the time they're in college, they would have spent 10,000 hours gaming. So they're super proficient at gaming, because 10,000 hours was that magic number that Malcolm Gladwell had talked about in his book Outliers, to say this is what gives a person mastery. So our job as parents is to give them 10,000 hours of emotional skill training, so that when they graduate out of your home as a full-fledged adult, they have the self-control to hold their tongue when they're really angry, and then instead very calmly say to their new spouse, you know, I feel like that's a bad idea, right? So they have that emotional skill.
Well, and that's what your book is really focusing on, is talking about, you know, I mean, technology is super easy for people to learn, but what about the emotional skills? Like, I mean, that's really what's at the core of it.
Very much so. So we talk about 5 A+ emotional skills in growing up social. And here's the thing. I'm going to say these skills, and just picture your child leaving your home, making their own way in the world with these skills. And what would that be like? So they have the skill of affection, the A+ skill of affection. They know how to give love and receive love. They're not just like emoji, 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 emoji. Just think of how limiting that is, that we are communicating primarily, let's say by text, like I love you, versus face to face, eye to eye, I love you. Next best thing would be like this long love letter, right? Of all those words. Think of the emotion, the depth, the clarity that can be there versus emoji, 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 right? It's so different. So can a child give and receive affection? Will they be able to get engaged in a proper way and not just like by text or by short answer, or they don't know really how to talk to each other? So the second skill is appreciation, and it's the idea of a grateful child, the idea of a child who at a birthday party, when you give them a little goodie bag at the end, they look you in the eye and they say, thank you, where everyone else is clamoring like, I got the red one. Yours is bigger than mine. You got two of those,
Yeah.
And so it's the skill of appreciation. And what the phones and all the digital stuff has done, it's given us instant access to whatever we want. And we don't have to wait for answers. The kids are like, why is it taking so long, Mom? The Wi-Fi is weak here, where in years past, we would have had to walk to a library, grab a book, look up a fact, and now they're just like, Siri, who is such and such? And it gives them a report. So they're not appreciative. They're more entitled, like, Mom, why is dinner taking so long? Or I don't like this, or I don't want to watch the show, or this is really boring. So that's not good. We want a grateful child, because a grateful child at the end of the day is a happy child. And then the next one is anger management. We're all going to be angry, and anger can be a very positive emotion, but how can you deal with this anger? And believe me, you take Fortnite or some other video game away from a child and you will see some anger, right? And so it is this idea of how do people deal with anger? And a lot of the video games fuel anger, that you find that a lot of your kids are, what happened to them? They're so much more aggressive than they used to be. And so that is huge. Apology is the fourth skill. Does my child know how to apologize, instead of just like, okay, unfriend because we had a fight, or something happened, someone's feelings were hurt, so I'm just going to say all this stuff on social media about this person, instead of saying, you know what, you hurt my feelings. And for that other person to learn how to say, I'm really sorry. Will you please forgive me? And that's something social media does not encourage at all. And then that last A+ skill is attention. Can your child sit through class? Are you getting notes from the teacher? Your child is not able, your child is talking in class, your child is not paying attention, your child is not doing, et cetera. I don't have to tell you.
Right.
And
They're not able to focus.
Right. Yeah. And teachers will tell you all day long, like, this is a very hard generation to teach, because it's hard to capture their attention unless it's like, something digital and it's moving very quickly. And so our attention span has dropped 40% since the iPhone came, and so it just makes sense, because our attention is so used to this now. That when we need to sit and read a book, it's not there. Now, can you read on the internet? Can you read on Kindle? Of course you can, but it's not the same kind of deep reading that you do with a book in a corner. So for instance, if a child, and we're like this as parents too, if you're looking at an article online, you're like, is this not done yet? Oh, look, there are shoes on sale. Oh, someone's messaging me. Your brain is used to that distraction. Whereas when you're sitting, and when your child is able to sit for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour with a book they really love, right? That's very good for their attention span, and that's going to help them. And so that needs to be done early, because if a child has been raised on video games and on cute little cartoons in the grocery store when they're 2 years old, and I'm not trying to guilt you, but when they're raised that way, and then you say, okay, it's time to read this book, they're like, why would I do that? I'd much rather watch TV. Like, I'm not going to read this book. But if they're raised as a young child, 2, 3, 4, 5, that books are their friends and we go to the library, that's very easy then for them to transition as an 8-year-old, as a 9-year-old of, well, let's sit in a corner and read this book. And that's fabulous for their attention span.
Yeah. And Arlene, I'm curious if this is the same in your household. So with our kids, my eldest, the 10-year-old, is a girl, and my youngest, the 8-year-old, is a boy. So my eldest couldn't get a book out of her hand. Like, she's just nose deep in a book. Like, she reads voraciously. I mean, she loves it. She goes through books so fast. We don't have to encourage her to read, because she just does it naturally. Right. And so we have fostered that in our family of, let's go on adventures. Let's go to the library. Let's check out books. Let's, let's read as a family. That's been something that's really been important to us since they were little bitty, is snuggling down in bed as a family, reading for at least 20 minutes every single night. And that certainly helped. So in our very own household, we've got her that's like taking to it absolutely amazing. Sure. And then our son, who, I mean, we try to do the same exact techniques
and he had
with
that
him.
same process.
Same exact household. He wasn't living in a separate house. Like, it's our same place. And he always comes to us as like, ugh, books are boring. I just want to play a video game, or what's on Netflix? Can we watch blah, 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 blah. And, you know, some of the shows that they like to watch, their kids' shows, my daughter calls it fish dribble. Like, it's just, you can feel your brain dribbling out of your skull, because it's like providing no no sustenance whatsoever. So in that situation, what happened? Is it really like, you know, nature versus nurture, or his personality and type is just different? I mean, what would you suggest then?
Yeah. And I think that it does show you that even, you know, some kids are going to take to reading more naturally.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. And then some are going to be like, okay, I do this because I'm supposed to, and my work requires it, and school requires it, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But you've given your son the skills to be able to do it when he has to do it.
Yeah.
And you have given him opportunity for him to have that reading time. And maybe, who knows, in a year or two, there might be a book series that he just is like, oh, I love this. And that will change. There could be some kind of, you know, author that really connects with him, and that will change in his life.
Yeah.
And so I would say don't give up. So if you have a child and you're like, oh, it just doesn't seem to be working, just keep trying.
Yeah.
Just keep going. Like, try this series or whatever. And then also maybe audiobooks that on car rides, those fiction books that are really interesting that an adult and a child could like, those kinds of things to kind of pique that interest, because that audio is also really good, listening to an audiobook, because at least your brain then is filling in the imagination of what those characters look like, and you're picturing it in your mind. And in that sense, that's more fruitful for your child's brain than watching a movie.
Yeah, and that's a really good tip on audiobooks for sure. One thing that is working, and we've only just started this in the last couple of weeks with all four of us, is getting into the Lemony Snicket series of books. And, you know, just perfect for this age. I'll put a link in the show notes for people to check those out. A little dark, I'll give you that. But I think maybe that's what makes it a little bit more intriguing for him to actually want to read it and not watch it on Netflix. Let's read it first and then watch later. So how can you, as a parent, then tell if maybe your son or daughter is too involved with too much screen time? Like, what are the warning signs in your mind?
Let's say your child used to really like doing something, used to love riding bikes in the neighborhood, used to love drawing, loved horses, loved basketball, you know, whatever it is, there was an activity they like. But now when you're like, hey, you want to go shoot some hoops? They're like, nah. And they go back into their room, they play a video game, or they social media, or they watch TV. So a loss of interests that they used to like. You think, wait a minute, those were healthy things that my child was doing, but now they just want to watch TV or they just want to play video games. So that's one thing. You know, obviously when you ask them to stop and there's an outburst and there's anger and there's, you're the meanest mom ever, you're the meanest dad ever, then you know, like, okay, that really should not have elicited that, that it's time to go to dinner, or it's time to go to bed, it's time to do your homework. You know, if that's going to be this, you're going to hit every day about that, then you'll know, like, this is not healthy. This is not working for you.
Right.
If you see them socializing less with their friends, like if especially for girls and guys too, if they used to hang out, but now they're not hanging out anymore in real life, they're just like posting to each other. They think, wait a minute, you guys need less phone time. You need a friend that you actually see, that you actually meet at the mall and you actually go and see. Things like that. And then, you know, as they get older, personal hygiene, it's like, okay, you need to take care of yourself and not just stay in the basement of our house playing video games. And time, are they responsible with their other interests? So how are their grades? A lot of times, you know, I just had a mom recently come to me and she said, you know, I gave my child a phone when they were 12, straight A student. And within 2 weeks, you know, because the grades change so quickly because you took a quiz and you bombed and now you have an F, you know. But for this straight A student who's now has this phone and came home with an F within 2 weeks of getting the phone, so they had to talk and the daughter realized, and she cared. Some kids won't care. I get that. But she cared, and she saw the correlation, and they decided it was too soon for her to have the phone, and they took it back.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to tell, like, can they do their normal responsibilities and their mood? Did their mood change? Besides the normal, teenager, I'm growing and all these things are happening. But do you feel like this is a different child since we've allowed these video games, or since we got Netflix, or since we've been giving a device to them? And then you have the power as a parent to say, that's not healthy for you, and we're going to take that away. Because last time I checked, your 8-year-old is not paying your phone bill, right? So take that back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And well, I mean, that's it. I think we as a parent, we forget that we're the foundation, right? We're the ones that also are the role models for them. So I think that we can't say to our kids on one hand, hey, put that screen down, but then texting at the dinner table ourselves,
exactly.
Right?
We have to get that.
Right. We have to set up those kinds of boundaries, and also just core values, I would imagine, as well, right? Yes. So let's talk about that. What are other ways that we can kind of take back control of our homes from that overdependence of screens? What do you see as working, or what have you heard?
Yes. So I would say that kind of rules for how all these things go. And by rules, I mean, you don't have to be so legalistic that it's like, oh, it's 1 minute past and we can't do that. But just that there are rhythms in the day. So there's a screen-free meal time, and that's normal.
Yep.
And so if that's going to be difficult, then make that your one to do. I'm going to simplify my life by getting those phones out of the dinner table so we can have this connection.
Yep.
Maybe it's a 1 day a week where it's like, we don't play video games on this day. Mommy and daddy don't watch Netflix on this day, that there's a day set aside for true rest.
Yeah.
We think we're resting when we're sitting around watching TV. That is not rest. That's like leisure. And at the end of it, you just feel like I just ate a bag of potato chips. Like, it's just the feeling of like, I've just kind of vegged out, but I'm not really replenished. Mm-hmm. But if you would have gone out in nature, if you would have read a book, if you would have done like a service project, like something that was different, you would have felt much more rested. So try it.
And I dare say that when we watch TV now, I'll be the first to admit I'm guilty, is that we're not even just watching TV. We're watching TV and flicking on our phone and looking at a tablet over here. I mean, there's like multiple things going on at the same time, right? So it's,
Yeah, that's not leisure. That's not true rest, So to have that. And then for our family, so I want to say this so that people don't think like, oh, that's nice. She talks about that, but her kid's probably playing video games in the basement right now. So, my son is 12. My daughter, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. My son is 14. He's in high school. Mm-hmm. My daughter's in middle school, 12. And then Lucy is in 4th grade. She's 9. And none of the kids have personal phones, which is totally weird. None of the kids have personal tablets. We do not get Netflix. So we have engineered the structure, like the physical things they can get to, that we've kind of designed it so they wouldn't have this temptation of having this in their pocket all the time. So I love to tell families that that's possible. I'm not saying like, oh, look at me, you should, no. What I'm saying is that is possible, because sometimes we think that's not an option. Like, it's not an option. Like, I have to give my middle schooler a phone. I have to let her on social media, or else all of her friends will, disown her. Mm-hmm. And to be able to say, I have a 12-year-old girl who's very happy even though she isn't on Snapchat and Instagram, like that's okay. Like she will make it, and she can have friends this way. Yep. And so I love to say, pick your weird. Like, I know that's weird, but it's also weird for like a 15-year-old boy to be in a basement for much of his life because he's playing a video game instead of riding a bike or learning a skill or learning an instrument or learning a trade. Like, that's weird. Mm-hmm. So pick your weird.
Yeah. And, I really like that as well, because with my 10-year-old, we've started to talk about, gosh, when are other kids getting phones now? And she'll talk about it with us and have an open dialogue with her in this. And because it's not, I think as kids get a little bit older, it's less about top-down management than it is more like, let's talk about this as a collective, right. and what is your feelings on it? What are my feelings on it? And let's come together as a family unit with a shared decision. And it's interesting with her is that she's like, yeah, a couple of friends already have a phone. phone at 10. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. And she's like, yeah, I know. It's kind of crazy. I don't know if I want a phone yet. I'm like, tell me more. Like, what are you feeling? And so I think, you might be quite surprised. Some kids, like my younger son, who wants to have a screen in his hand at all time, if we would let him, maybe isn't ready yet to have that kind of decision-making power fully, but he still has a voice in it, so he still has a voice in the conversation of like, well, this is important because of this. And then we can kind of come back and say, hey, we hear you. That. Yeah. Yes. But also, did you know that this is what happens when, kids don't get outdoor time, or what happens to their brains, and like just be able to share with them, like, this is what the consequence to that decision. And this is why we as parents have decided to do this. But having that conversation, being a parent who's not, who is open to having conversation, I think is really important.
Very important.
Mm-hmm. So what about, and I can imagine somebody somewhere is listening to this right now and going, oh, wait, pause, Mary, pause.
Wait a second.
Pause. What about the time when I need to get stuff done and I just need a peace and quiet? So what are other healthy ways that they can occupy their kids without just going, well, here's a tablet, just go,
And the mindset here has to be, okay, I have to retrain a new habit.
Yes.
Because sometimes we'll think, oh, magically, I'm just going to switch this out and they're going to be like, fabulous. It's like, no. But so we give up. So we're like, it doesn't work. So the TV show is the only thing that works. The video game's the only thing that works. So that's what we're going to do because that works.
Path of least resistance, right?
Yes, that works. And so you have that payoff that I get my things done and that's working. But in the long run, that just fuels more problems for both you and for your child in the long run, because all of a sudden they don't know how to pacify themselves without a screen. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And so for us to realize, okay, if I've got this toddler, right, and they've been watching this TV show, and that's how I get things done. Now I have to retrain and have a new habit. So today I say, okay, Melissa, today's a super special day. And instead of doing this cartoon, we are going to do what's in the laundry basket. And this is such a special day. And you put stuff in the laundry basket that's not normally there, toys or whatever, and you put it in front of her. You go, okay, I'm going to set, and now you get to figure out what's in the laundry basket. And obviously you understand what I'm doing. And then the next day there are different things in the laundry basket. And the next day there are different things. And you're making a new habit for that little toddler. Let's say it's an older child. Okay. You're used to, all right. Well, you know what? I am realizing that you kind of seem like you like drawing. So I've got you these new, pens and pencils and papers, and we're going to have a drawing contest. And I just want you to get better and better and better. So you have a great job at winning the family drawing contest. So let's go. So you're thinking like, what are the interests of your child, whether it's getting a book, whether it's them drawing something, but even for them to learn, like I can spend a half an hour doing something else.
Yes.
Legos, drawing, building, dolls, sewing, crafts, whatever it is that isn't screen time, that's really good for the child. And again, the first day might be rough. The second day might be rough. The third day might be rough. But by like week 2, your child gets it. Like, my dad is not budging, and this is my new normal, so I better get to it. And they'll learn. They'll learn that new habit, and they'll be happier for it, and they'll be much nicer at dinner time because it's a lot easier to say to a child who's like combing hair and doing braids, okay, it's time to come to dinner, than a child that's engrossed halfway in a TV show.
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing you saying here is huge. Like, don't give up. Like, don't give up. Just try new things and get them outside, get them a ball, get them something, make it a fun game that can help them change that their go-to for pleasure, let's say, isn't just to a screen, isn't just to a TV show or to social media.
Yes.
Yeah. So, gosh. And, I think that what's tricky for me, I mean, today's an anomaly as the day we're taping here. It's a beautiful sunny day in England, but in the wintertime, it is usually gray and miserable and cold. And so you're all crammed into a teeny tiny house together. And, but even still there, I think there is those times where you still have to find something other than a screen to, to be able to do, right?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
absolutely true. And even if it's something as like, okay, once a week, and once a week might be much, but once a month, you're going to write a letter to grandma. Like, it
Yeah.
can be just something you can do inside, but that's meaningful and connects people.
Well, maybe that's it. We do family meetings every now and again. And, sometimes I get the eye roll and the, family meeting. Let's just be real. My family is not
Sure.
perfect by any stretch of the means. But sometimes I will say the kids call the family meeting for us. They say, hey, Mom, we really need a family meeting. I'm like, okay, great.
Right. I love that.
So when you have a family meeting as a collective, all sitting around the dinner table, maybe that you kick it to the team and say, hey, let's all brainstorm ideas of what we can do for fun that doesn't require a screen. Like grab a giant whiteboard out and brainstorm it out together. So, you've gave us some great ideas on this episode already, but maybe there are other things that, you hadn't even thought of. Like air dry clay, or I don't know, painting binders and doing some different things. Like, so there may be a whole list of stuff once you give them the power to start thinking about it. And then you as the parent, come up with a plan to save up money to buy the art supplies and, create maybe an art zone in your room or in your house. Like, so starting to create that.
And I think for the parents, we have to buy in of why is all this effort worth it?
Right.
And so just think if you have a 5-year-old and she's just swiping, putting like clothes on people and giving them different hair and different shoes. Look, all she's doing is like barely moving and moving her finger. What if she, instead of that, was in her mom's closet, pulling off jackets and putting on, it's just such a night and day different experience. And just if we can catch hold of, if my children play, that's what kids do. That's what comes naturally. Look at us. We're trying to brainstorm it. It's like, just let them be. And they'll take out all their stuffed animals and line them up and have a show. That's what my daughter had done. And I'd come back in the room and it's like all the stuffed animals are looking like they're in a stadium and one of them's doing a show. And it's just let them do what they do. And that's naturally play. And what we've done as a mistake as a society and as parents is so young, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, we've given them this and all that creativity is evaporating. So just think in your mind, okay, I want a more creative child and I will do this for them.
Right.
That I will give them unstructured, screen-free playtime for them to use their imagination. It's what they're good at.
Yeah. And, I realize that you've written this book with Dr. Gary Chapman. He's the writer of The 5 Love Languages. What does love languages, how does that play into screen time in your mind?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's say your child's love language is touch. So they love to be hugged and all that. My youngest daughter, Lucy, that's when she was 2 years old, she'd come into the room, huggy, huggy. You knew that's your time. So how many times then when you're watching, everyone's on their own little personal entertainment system. So when your child's playing a video game, you're not like sitting next to them like, oh, that's a good job. Way to shoot the bad guy. Like you're nowhere near your child, right?
Yeah.
And so if your child's love language is touch, but everyone is touching this, right? Instead of hugging each other, even in reading, like when you read together, when your kids are little, you're cuddled up next to each other.
Yeah.
But if now the child is just like reading a little book on the iPad and then going to sleep, you've lost that time for affection instead of talking and saying things, for love that, it's sometimes we talk less. Because we're watching too many things. And so that's hugely important. Acts of service, that doing things for each other. Sometimes we're so distracted here, we're not doing nice things for each other.
Yeah.
And the gifts don't have to be electronic. The love language, you say, oh, well, my child's love language is gifts, so I gave her an iPhone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And of course, yes, that is a gift. However, I got these flowers for you because, your little girl loves daisies or whatever. Like you could have non-electronic gifts. So spending the time to do that. And time obviously is probably the biggest one that give your child uninterrupted. I am completely here. My eyes are on you. My body language is towards you. They did a survey of 6,000 kids and half of them said my parents' worst habit is being on their phone too much. And what bugs me the most is when we are in conversation and they stop and interrupt the conversation to answer a text or look at some notification that, means nothing. And so spending time with your child that's totally uninterrupted by screens and that's a huge one, because we are not spending quality time anymore because we're just on screens when we are honest in our free time.
So as you said at the top of the episode, which blows my mind, average American kid right now, ages 8 to 18, is getting about 7 hours a day of screen time. That is just bonkers, blows my mind.
It's like almost a work day.
Well, it's just, I can't even. It boggles my mind. So what should the kids be getting? What would you recommend?
Yes,
instead?
No screens at all from a baby till 2 years old. And that's really vigilant, because even with the older siblings in the house, it's teaching the older siblings, babies got this brain. And baby's brain really needs to form things that are mobile and touching and language and sensory, and not just flat and screen. So really, you've got a screen, go, we got to turn that off. Baby's here. And that's hard, but it's totally worth it. So no screens, be crazy vigilant about that.
Yep.
And then from 2 really on, I would say the American Academy of Pediatrics used to say 2 hours or less a day. But with the changing landscape and school and all these different things, they've said, use your limits and your best judgment. So they've kind of kicked it back to us as parents. And I think that 2 hours a day or less is very good. And that's something that we would practice here at our house. But I would also say for some families, that's going to be like, that's way too much. So for instance, for our family, our kids use their devices from school for their homework, and they come home with them, a laptop for high school, iPad in junior high. They use their homework, but then that's it. And then we've had to be like, okay, you're watching too many YouTube videos about how to modify a Nerf gun, and so that's something that we have to work at, teaching the kids like, okay, take 15 minutes and do your fun stuff, and then you need to put it away.
Yeah.
So teaching those limits. So I think 2 hours or less a day is very good. Other families will think, oh my word, we're like at that 8-hour mark. How in the world are we going to get 2 hours? Then it's like, well, let's get down to 5. So work your way down. But I definitely think the less screens per day, the better your mental health, emotional health, physical and spiritual health is going to be for all of us.
Yeah.
For all of us.
And maybe in those family meetings and collective together, maybe you guys come to the table and say, right, this is out of control. Let's get down to 5 hours. What's the reward when we all finally get there? Like maybe we can take a day trip to, I don't know, an amusement park or someplace that they want to go. So, thinking about human nature, that sometimes it's nice to have a reward at the end of something hard that you're going through, so that you'll all be eyes on the prize to get there. And one of the things I thought was really interesting that the book mentioned was, think about this time that your children are on their screens at school in relation to that 2 hours per day as well. Yeah. And that's something that didn't really occur to me until I was like, oh yeah, because my kids go to primary school, that's elementary school here in the UK, and easily they do probably about an hour of what's called ICT time. So if that's an hour at school, then an hour at home is where we have our boundary as well. Yeah. And a lot of times your electronics that you have for them, so a Nintendo Switch or a Wii or whatever, is going to have time limits that you can set as the parents in there that helps kind of be able to handle,
to make a system.
To make a system and a boundary, because when the Nintendo Switch turns off, it's like, oh, okay, well, I can't use this anymore. It's not oh my God, panic and meltdown and all of the things because you're desperately trying to tell them to turn it off. Yeah, good stuff. So again, just a reminder to you guys, the book is called Growing Up Social, and it's really helping you how to manage your screen time and raise relational kids in a screen-driven world. I'll have the link in the show notes for you guys to check that out. I highly recommend it, regardless if your kids are babies or if you've got teens as well. I think there are lessons in the book that will help any age group there as you walk through this process. So I have a few questions for you that I like to ask everybody, and I'm so glad to have you back because I think you're just a fountain of knowledge and I could just talk to you all day long. So right now, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring or challenging you?
What's funny is it's actually even related, and I just finished this on the plane ride, and I absolutely loved it. I just came from a speaking engagement, and it's called The Tech Wise Family, Everyday Steps for Putting Technology in Its Proper Place, and it's by Andy Crouch, and it has new insights and research from the Barna Research Group, and I adore it. This is a fabulous book. So this is my new companion book with Growing Up Social is go get yourself The Tech Wise Family. It's really good.
Fantastic. We'll put a link in the show notes for people so you guys can check that out as well. So tell us, who is maybe one person in your circle of friends or colleagues that you think we should interview on the Simplifiers next?
I think you should interview Kathy Lipp, who has many, many books. So it's Lipp with 2 P's, and she is so fun and practical and wise. And she has this clutter-free academy where she helps people to get that clutter, a physical clutter out of your home, but also helping you with family clutter, emotional clutter, all those kinds of things. But she's fabulous, and she's written a gazillion books, and she's great, Kathy Lipp.
Excellent. Well, we will link her as well so we can get connected with her. She sounds perfect. So gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me what's one thing you're grateful for right now, here and today.
Oh, I am grateful for you, Mary, and the ability to be able to talk with you. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to people about technology because I think it breaks my heart when I go through the grocery store and I see these like 18 months olds with a little, instead of like looking at the fruit and looking at the different colors and holding the bell pepper and talking to their parents. Because I remember when I had my baby, I would talk to them in the grocery store like, "That's an apple, dear," and "Okay, mommy's gonna go get the celery now. Let's go." And that's all that interaction of, and you switch that, and all of a sudden it's total silence between them, with the mom and then the kid just like here, and I'm just thinking, my goodness, and so. Obviously, I don't say anything to that person in that moment, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity through the books like Growing Up Social, through us talking, to have that opportunity to tell people, let's not waste those precious years and let's help our kids develop so they can grow up into human beings that don't have these addiction problems and that know they're loved.
Well, it makes me really worry about what the next generation is going to look like, what life is going to look like when the kids of now are grown-up adults 20, 30 years down the line. And, I just want to encourage people that are listening, like, it's not massive sweeps of changes, just tiny little things.
It's so true.
Teeny, tiny changes that can be made to start to get to a healthier place when it comes to screen time. So just a reminder, the book is called Growing Up Social, and you can find that basically anywhere where books are sold, but you can also click the link in our show notes to be able to check it out. Also, you have got a free quiz out now. Are your kids getting too much screen time? Everybody loves a quiz, so we'll put the link in our show notes as well so people can take that and just to check in, well, how are we doing as a family?
That's right.
That might be a good thing for people as well. So my final question for you today is this, and by the way, you can find Arlene online at arlenepellicane.com or on Instagram at the same, or Facebook, Arlene Pellicane author. And again, those links are in the show notes. So if somebody somewhere out in the world is listening to this episode now, and maybe, just maybe, in the next room to them, their child is on a screen right now, and they're really feeling it. They're like, I don't know how to rip that tablet out of his hands without him having a total, utter meltdown. Arlene, what would you whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her?
I would say that you have to first believe it, that you can do it, like have the faith to believe, you know what, I can do this. I can do this. Like I have the fortitude within myself with God's help, to outlast this child and the onslaught that I will receive if we make this change. Because a lot of times we just give up. Like, it's not possible. Like, that works for your kids. It doesn't work for mine.
It's too hard.
And so it's too hard. And so for us first to believe, like, this is possible, and then to reach out for help. Maybe there's someone in your circle that they've done this before and it succeeded. And you can take them to coffee or to tea and say, can you please help me? And can you please call me in a month and just ask me how it's going? And just don't be afraid to ask for that help and that mentoring in that area. And then be really specific. Like, instead of like, oh, we've just got to change all this screen time and then, oh, it just didn't work. Be super specific. Like, you know what? Between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, we are going to not have the screens do all the entertaining, but they're going to do their homework. They're going to finish their homework before dinner. And this is the new normal. And just be super specific so you know if you did it or not.
Yeah. Arlene, thank you so much for being back on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Mary.